Generally, in breach of contract cases, there must be a valid contract between the parties before a court orders specific performance as a remedy. Consequently, courts usually won't order specific performance unless the contract is based on adequate consideration. In the 1967 case, Tuckwiller v. Tuckwiller, the Missouri Supreme Court considered whether consideration was adequate to specifically enforce a contract in which a party agreed to devise her land to another. Flora Metta Morrison, who we'll call Mrs. Morrison, was an elderly woman with Parkinson's disease who owned a 160-acre farm in Missouri. Ruby Tuckwiller, who we'll call Ruby, was married to Mrs. Morrison's nephew, John, and was an employee at a local school. Mrs. Morrison became concerned about her disability and the possibility of being confined to a nursing home. Mrs. Morrison then began to urge Ruby to quit her job to care for her. However, Ruby was reluctant to give up her job for what she thought might involve several years of care. Eventually, Mrs. Morrison and Ruby entered into a written agreement where Ruby agreed to leave her job to care for Mrs. Morrison for the rest of her life. In exchange, Mrs. Morrison agreed to devise Ruby her farm in her will. 3 days after signing the agreement, Mrs. Morrison made an appointment with a lawyer to change her will. At the time, under Mrs. Morrison's will, the farm was to be converted to cash and given to establish a student loan fund at Davidson College. On the same day that Mrs. Morrison was to meet with the lawyer, she fainted and was taken to a nearby hospital. Although she was discharged, she fainted again and eventually was readmitted to the hospital, where she remained until she passed away. As a result of her hospitalizations, Mrs. Morrison was unable to meet with her attorney and change the provisions in her will. Following her death, Marion Tuckwiller was appointed as executor of Mrs. Morrison's will and sought to sell the farm and distribute the proceeds to Davidson College. Subsequently, Ruby sued Marion and Davidson College in state circuit court for specific performance of the contract. Following trial, the court granted Ruby specific performance, concluding that at the time of entering into the contract, the kind and duration of services to be provided were so uncertain that the contract was fair. Marion and Davidson College appealed to the Missouri Supreme Court.